Hey, hey everybody. I should really edit this video better. It's something that I used during COVID when I was bored, and it looks like it. So good morning, everybody, and good morning, Danielle. Saputo, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And thank you for having me here today.
Of course, and you're in Toronto.
I'm north of Toronto.
Very, very nice. So I'm very happy to be here with you today. And you've spoken at our conference, I believe, at least once in Toronto, wasn't it?
There were 2 times, exactly.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that there were a couple of times in Toronto, though, and I should really grab you to Vancouver and Calgary and other locations, and not just Toronto. So we will talk about a lot of stuff today, and get to know you better, and just maybe I'll start with a couple of words about you from your bio here. So obviously a next generation and a life learner dedicated to bringing this, how you describe yourself, to bringing out the best of yourself, in herself and others. She's a business graduate from Concordia University. Today you advise families and others. We'll talk about it in a second. You're an accredited certified coach through the International Coaching Federation and the Coach Teaching Institute. We'll talk about all of that because we talked before the meeting started about advisors, consultants that came from families, which is an interesting thing that I've seen before in not too many, but some people that went the same route, which is interesting. She's a Family Enterprise Advisor Designated. She through the Family Enterprise Xchange and completed a certification in applied positive psychology. I need to do that, positive psychology. I can definitely use that. As a family advisor, she's clarifying purpose, resolving conflicts, and applying total wealth, where wealth is much more than financial capital. Its focus here is on the human capital. And we'll talk about your book in a second. I think what you mentioned is, are you communicating in a way that the family is in harmony? And that's your email address, harmony. As a professionally trained coach, Danielle's goal is to hold a safe space for her clients. And she's the 3rd generation of the Saputo family. We'll talk about that as well. She worked for her family business until she got married and then moved to Ontario and began a family of her own. And we'll talk about that and what led you to do what you do. Today, you're the president of Denudo Holdings, an investment company, and a trustee for Lakefield College School, and also co-facilitates parenting workshops. That's interesting, with her community, as well as a group of FIAs to share and learn. What is FIA? Sorry?
FEA are the Family Enterprise Advisors coming out of the designation with the Family Enterprise Canada.
So yeah, so that's you in a nutshell. So good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
So maybe I'll start with you know, as a family member, 3rd gen of a very prominent family. So maybe you could put everything in place. You're the 3rd gen. You have your sister. I had the pleasure of interviewing your sister Patricia before, and she will be speaking at a Montreal conference that's coming up in October, I believe. So maybe if you can just share with us a couple of words about the family. Everybody knows the name, but you say sometimes they confuse you with other businesses. So maybe just a little bit about your roots.
Very good. Yeah, it's funny because when I'm asked that question, I say, how far back do I begin? So my father and grandfather were the first to leave Italy to come to Canada. My father, one of 8 siblings, all worked together to build the Saputo Cheese Corporation. So the manufacturing company in the dairy field. and you know, you would ask me like, hey, I was part of something big and fantastic, but growing up, there were no boundaries. We didn't know anything differently than the way we were. My parents were, and I think to this day, I'll always thank them for raising us to be very humble and really understanding the value of the dollar. So we never took any allowance or any money that came our way for granted. And we learned at a very early stage that if we wanted to get something for ourselves, we had to work hard to put that aside. So growing up third generation, yes, you might say, hey, you came with lots of affluence and came from something big, but really we were raised you know, taking the bus to school. We were raised in a way that didn't make us feel like we were extraordinary in any way. I myself grew up, we're 5 sisters. So our generation.
Sisters. Wow.
We're all girls, yes, and honestly, we're 21 first cousins, and out of the 21, there's only 4 males in there. So only 2 males who carry the Saputo name that goes on into the generations. Otherwise, the rest of us are female. And yes, so it was very, you know, without thinking at a very young age, 12, 13, 14, 15, I would easily go to work with my dad, have summer jobs at the company. And at that age, I never thought twice about it. It was just, hey, I had to work over the summer to be able to have fill up my own pockets, and the easy, I guess it was easy. It was just, hey, do I have a job? And I had worked in the filing room many summers. Then once I started university, I was working there with what I thought was more of a seriousness in the roles and responsibilities I had. Now I left, I married in the year 2000, and my husband was from Ontario. So I left, but at the same time, there was a transition. So I felt my change was different because I married and left Quebec. But there was also a change within Saputo and its structure that in the late 1990s, they went public, and through going public and I guess their own internal changes, where at one point we could have easily been 70 plus family members working there. Coming into the 2000s, there was really just one branch of the family that remained as employees of the Saputo Incorporated itself. And that left my sisters and I my parents were really strong in keeping us educated and finding our own path. And I guess we all knew instinctively that there was never there was never really a long-term position for us in the family company. So we each branched off to find our own interest and do the things that we now do.
And why is that? Why wouldn't your parents think that you should be in the business somehow, or open another business or something like that? I know there are different, by the way, strategies. Some families would only want the families to be involved, and some exactly the opposite. They don't want any of the family to be involved and hire external managers.
And exactly, and to me, to that, now being in that field, there is no right and wrong to that. And I think it's if you're very clear with what it is. Now, in my case, my path, it's funny because can I say I've ever really thought forward to where I'd be? No, I sort of followed a path that I felt laid out itself very clearly for me. Talking with other family members, there sometimes tends to be, being a female in a very male-dominated heritage, although we were mainly females in our family, there was still a very patriarchal kind of thinking. So having at that stage, one of the female cousins or one of the female family members take on a big role, certain people will probably comment that they sort of felt a little bit of pushback and not having that door as freely opened. Although from my experience, it was, you know, yes, I was put in the filing room at the age 15. Would I have amounted to being, taking on one of the leadership roles? Who knows? But that wasn't in my calling or in my cards. And here I am now with a wealth of knowledge to help other families navigate conversations to see what does their succession plan look like.
And what brought your grandparents to leave the country that invented Ferraro chocolates?
I was going to say that invented mozzarella cheese.
And that.
Yes. Well, it was late 1940s, late 1940s after the war. So it was my guess grandfather who made the decision for his family. When year after year you're getting, you think you have an opportunity and those opportunities don't flourish, you tend to open your eyes to see if there'll be better opportunities elsewhere for your family. My grandfather had a brother who actually lived in the States at the time, who was giving him very positive feedback of what it was like across the ocean. So he thought, you know what, let's go check it out. So that's when in the 1950s, he left with my father, who was 17 years old at the time, took the long road on the boat, arrived. They weren't able to make it right into the States because all the immigration laws were changing. So they ended up in Canada, sponsored by a farm here in Ontario. And they spent their first couple of years doing some very difficult finding themselves and collecting money to bring the rest of the family over. And like I said, my father's one of 8 children at the time. Not that not all of them were, but there was one who was born here in Canada. So yes, it was fine. They left for wanting to find some better opportunities.
And when they came, there wasn't already local competition that was already well established. I mean, or they found a gap in the market, or what?
So honestly, it's not that they came with the thought that they were coming to start making cheese, but it was my father who, like I said, they were sponsored by a farm here in Ontario. And when he had asked if he can just experiment with they had cows on this farm, and he says, "Can I just experiment with the milk?" And in Italy, his mother's family was in the cheese business, so he knew how to work the milk to make cheese. And when he did that and realized, wow, Canadian cows yield some pretty good milk here to make some great mozzarella and great cheeses. And through what he knew when he left Italy and arrived here, he shared that news with his father. And as the rest of the family came, they said, should we try this out? And honestly, if they were to try to repeat that today, I think there were so many elements that led them to be successful as they were, because there was a whole flux of Italian immigrants looking for what they remember from home. So all of a sudden, when this Italian cheese was out, it was like a reminiscent of home, that you had a great community that was backing you up. Then pizzerias was the next big thing that was happening in the early 50s in Canada. So with all the pizzerias that were opening and having the cheese to go on these pizzas was another thing that added to the success. And there were just a number of things that the timing at the moment allowed for Saputo to grow in its early years, that kept the family going and growing.
And I'm looking at the list of people on our call today. I don't see any Israeli names, maybe one. So most of you will not know, but Strauss family, which I think she spoke at the last conference, Dr. Navam Michael Sabari. It's so interesting because she's, like herself, a next gen and a consultant. Her PhD is in family business, and they're dairy manufacturers. So they came to Israel with, they had 2 cows, basically. Later, they were purchased by Nestle, but, it's funny. Which brings me to think about it. I need to get to the Ferraro family. It's a family business. I mean, my conversation with them would be like, how the hell do you do this? I mean, I'm addicted. You wouldn't believe what's going on. Whenever it's just so good. And you said growing up modestly, and I was about to ask, is that a Canadian thing? And then I remember that I met some other families that were not that modest, but I happen to know some of your family members and yourself, and that brings me to ask, there's a Canadian family actually that came that just had a huge exit, and that's what's interesting. Always, maybe I should connect you too, by the way. Because there's old wealth and new wealth, and old wealth already knows what the new wealth apparently doesn't about next gen and how do you do that. And she said they did an exit. I think it's like $500 million kind of an exit, and out of the blue. It's not that they were poor before, but still, it's a major liquidity event. She said, "We don't know. We didn't know how. What do we tell our kids now, guys? You have $500 million in your bank account," which brings me to the point of, do you, I mean, there are, again, different strategies. Do you tell your kids they're wealthy at an early age? Do you tell them that at a later age? Do you, how, I mean, did you grow up knowing, I wouldn't have to worry anyway at some point, or I know that we are very strong, or did they limit you in, and, and what's the best way to go about it? And probably there isn't a good answer for that, but because I've seen families where I don't know if it's connected. It's probably is, where the next gen is messed up, because when you're, first of all, I see it in many different forms. There's a family where the father is a billionaire in whatever it is, and he comes to work in the family business, and he has this thing of, what can I possibly do to make an impact? I mean, what? And everybody would look at you, oh, you're here because you're the son of the owner. Even though, by the way, there are families, other stories, I'm jumping into other stories. Carol Levin Burnick that sold Alberto Culver to Unilever for $4 billion. And I forgot her name, from Latin America, that actually took the business way higher than it was when they first got it, even though people always thought you are here because you're the kid of the owner. But my point is, you see many times next gens that are lost, and because they don't need to work hard, even if they will try, they cannot probably do something more amazing than their parents did, and they don't, and it doesn't work well, and can end up very badly. So that was a very long way to ask you.
And I was going to say, and the question is?
The question is, how do you tell your kids they're wealthy? When do you tell your kids they're wealthy? From your experience, how did you guys deal with it, and how do you advise others to deal with it? And especially, I mentioned new wealth, because they don't know any better. I mean, at least with old wealth, you have legacy, you're kind of born into this. New wealth, suddenly, hey, a new world. And so
like you commented, there is no one right or wrong answer, right? You got to know what it is with your family. This conversation, and I think, we'll often say, people say, so what are the biggest thing in your industry that you're seeing, the so-called trend is? And for me, it's exactly that. Like, when do you bring up the conversation of wealth? When do you bring up the conversation to say, hey, we are affluent and there's responsibilities with that affluence? And I've come to see that it's very much, what culture are you raising your family in, right? If you still have young kids, you're at an early stage to say, hey, it's the way we act, the way we are in our financial dealings that our children will see and pick up at a very early age. If you're growing your children saying you have nothing to worry about, we'll pay for anything, and there's nothing, and you're sort of leaving them the carte blanche, well, I believe you're sort of taking away that ability for that child to sort of feel their purpose or feel what the value of the dollar is. And, I think I mentioned it earlier. That's what I really feel grateful with my own parents, is we were taught at a very early age that things don't come for nothing. Anything you get comes from hard work. You'll only move forward if you educate yourself and make a spot for yourself. We had to find our own passion, our own role forward to sort of say, hey, I'm here with a purpose, and can I can I really feel connected to that purpose to go forward? So you had brought lots of things in there. You had commented about an individual being in a company. Like, I would say, when I worked at Saputo, I almost had to work 5 times harder to be seen for the value that I brought, because there'd often be that thought, oh, shucks, are people viewing me? Oh, I'm here because I carry the Saputo name. And I always felt, oh, shucks, I really have to work harder because I want to be here, because I have value to be here. I wouldn't want to be here like when I was 15, that, because I was the president's daughter, I was able to come in and have a job in the filing room. Well, in the later years, coming out of university, it's like, okay, I'm coming with a business degree, I'm coming with knowledge, I'm coming with something, like, let me be in a position where I can really stand my own ground, and I'm here for a reason, and not because I'm the uncle's, I'm the niece of the president. So, as I commented earlier, culture one builds within their family, I believe, is one of the cornerstones of, will you have the kids who are entitled, don't find passion, and potentially cause more trouble in their later years? Or are you building a culture where your children find purpose and have something to strive for, to say, hey, although I might not, that they have this big shadow that they're behind because their father, mother, grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, whoever family member has built something tremendous, is how can they find their own light to stand strong? And I'm sorry, I'm going to reflect back. Part of I Am Enough, the book that I wrote, sort of reflects on this, of finding your own inner lights and your own voice to be able to stand strong as an individual and say, hey, I have the power to be just as big. I have the power to be just as successful. I have the power to be somebody of my own, to then, find either a position within your family business or not, and really to pave your own way forward to be as fulfilled as you can be.
Now that brings me to ask, before we'll talk about your book, is so we talk about that phenomenon of very few, well, maybe not that few, but not that much either, not that many either, family members that became consultants. Now, I mentioned Dr. Nava Michael from Israel, David Bento, who's on our steering committee in Vancouver, is of course a great example. Patricia, your sister, you. So, I mean, I assume that growing up in a family business, seeing the tension, the challenges, the issues, growing up gives you an advantage that I think maybe a professional consultant, as good as maybe, doesn't have, or thinks he doesn't see, because he just wasn't there. Is that so? And what brought you to become a consultant to others, really?
So your first question of what leads some of us family members to do what it is we do, and there again, I can't speak for the others you've mentioned, but for myself, I think we see that there is a gap. And I think there is definitely an advantage when you're talking to other family members to sort of come with the eye of, I know that there are dynamics that we're dealing with. I lived with them too. And sort of bringing those real life examples that truly come from the heart really adds to the ability to help other families sort of open up and find that space to be able to share, okay, this is what we're going through. And one thing I know for myself growing up is we never shared our stories with anybody. We thought we were the only ones, or we sort of kept ourselves to say, well, if we're going through this, like, who do we share that with to find, is there, can someone else share their experience with us? So there's this thing of going forward isolated rather than finding the group of people who you can then say, oh my gosh, I am having this difficulty. My child's come home and says, hey, are we rich? How do I answer that? Right? Or oh shucks, I got this big acquisition to do, and who can I turn to? Because I don't want my competitors to know beforehand. And right. So who are the safe people that you can have these money conversations with to sort of know where to go forward? And I think there's the twofold. One is I got myself in this field, not by planning it, but I just felt that there was a need when I tended to go through doors, when doors open. And when I came out of the Family Enterprise Advisory Program, it was, yeah, you have all these advisors going through that, but how many of them are wearing the hat of a family member? How many are really seeing that human capital is one of the most important parts of the whole ecosystem of a family enterprise? And if you're not bringing forward in every conversation the human capital, well, where are the gaps then that they're having within their planning, that they're having the lawyers put together, the accountants, the financial people? Are they really taking into account where every family member who's potentially a future owner, are they taking in where each one of those members stand in their planning going forward, bringing in, like I said, that human capital side? And it was seeing that I thought, wow, can I pair up with these professionals to make sure that the human capital side is at the forefront? And if there's any one of those family members who's feeling too shadowed, can I help on the coaching side bring that person forward to say, hey, I'm a person here too, and I'm seeing something a little different. Am I strong enough to use my voice to speak that up the next time we're at the family table or in a family meeting? So that's what led me to the work that I do, is just seeing that there was a need. And it was really when I came across that saying of shirt sleeves in 3 generations, I really dove into that to say, well, my kids really are the 3rd generation of wealth transfer, because I look at my grandfather and my father's generation built the wealth together. So I never really felt that there was a true transfer within that those 2 generations. And the first transfer came from my father to us, and then my children being the 3rd generation of wealth transfer going to them. And I thought, are they prepared? Do they have all the tools they need? Do they understand what stewardship is? Do they understand that what's been built from their great grandfather is meant to go forward with their help 7 generations, and they educate the next generation to think 7 generations ahead? And it was trying to understand this, bringing wealth forward from generation to generation, that really led me say, well, if I'm trying to find all the tools for my own children, for my own family, well, then how many other families out there are trying to do the same? And through the knowledge and experiences I've had, how can I bring this forward to other families so that they can succeed and not feel feared by this shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations?
And by the way, when you're looking at different cultures, and it's interesting for us as well, we are today in Canada, we're in the US, we're in London, we're in Israel, we're in the UAE. Do you think at the end of the day, it's the same old issues bother the families, jealousy, who's going to manage, who's not going to manage? At the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing, or do you see cultural changes, differences, like that? Canadians families are more bothered than US families, or I don't know, European families, or at the end of the day, it all comes to the same place?
I think when you're dealing with human capital and human dynamics, at the end of the day, we're all, I believe, dealing with the same thing. And, it started when I first learned about the so-called shirt sleeves. You look at any culture, any part of the world, everyone has their saying the same thing. We're all saying, how do we keep our family harmonized? How do we keep our family still talking at the end of the day when money issues come into place? So you might have some nuances. And I think we spoke earlier before our call, like in Canada, mental health is a key thing. So all of a sudden that becomes part of the dynamic. Not that it's not as big an issue in other places, but I think each place might have their nuance. But at the end of the day, we are all human. We are all, building something and saying, well, now what do we do with what I built? If it's meant for the family, well, what is the dynamic of the family? Are we going the old way where it's the eldest son who takes over and we forget about everybody else? Or, oh, shucks, now we have a generation with only females. How do we deal with that? And there's just this continuous nuance that I think no matter where we are in the world, we're asking those same questions and always looking for the same kind of answers of how best can we keep our families together, and how do we keep our success, one, not keep creating spoiled brats of the next generation, but yet responsible people, next gens who are aware of their community, aware of what their position is, and aware to make a difference for themselves and the world that they live in.
I remember sitting with lawyers, they deal with families, and they told me, listen, sometimes everything is in place, everything is there, the agreement is there, but there is an emotional thing that this guy remembers that this guy's grandfather did, and he will never forgive him, and he will not sign this come hell or high water. And then they say the most important thing in deals, I come with an advisor with me that their job is to untie that thing that nobody really cares about besides these 2 people that will mess up this entire deal and everything, or the process they want to do in the family. That's the power, unfortunately, of emotions and stupid things that you might say, but are you kidding me? I think I had 2 uncles that never spoke to one another, and they forgot why, but they never spoke. They forgot. I mean, when you speak to them, why don't you speak to him? Well, I don't know. There was something. I'm telling you that. But they forgot why they don't talk, and they still didn't talk.
Well, that reminds me of that story about the, generation after generation, when the family would prepare for their Thanksgiving meal, they would prepare casserole, and before they put it in the oven, they would always cut off the ends and put it in the oven, until it took one of the great grandchildren to stop and say, "But Grandma, why do you cut the ends off the loaf before you put it in the oven?" And she would stop and she thought, she goes, "Well, why do I do that?" And then she laughed. She goes, "Well, really, there's no more reason to do it. But in the past, we never had the pots that were big enough. So we always had to cut the ends off so it would fit in our pot to go in the oven." And that's the same thing with past generation. You have, you gave that thing. It takes something silly two brothers might be arguing about. Then the cousins feel that there's tension between their father and their uncle. Then that keeps them distant from their cousin, although they've never had an issue with their cousin. The generations go on, and you say, well, why is there the silence? Just like the example you gave. And we forget what the past was. That the two brothers might have had a valid reason to be at differences, but I love the way my own father, he goes, I might have a difference with my brother, but that's between me and my brother. It has nothing to do with you. You'll always be his niece, and it's for you to set your relationship as as your relationship, not because of what differences we might have. And I always valued that is when you go forward, we too often as humans sort of judge people because of what we might have heard, not because of our own personal experience. And we got to watch out for that, because when we create those biases, it can really put relationships at odds that there's really no need for. And then all of a sudden you bring the conversation of wealth and money, and how do we split this, and how do we become owners together, and all of a sudden, yes, that can explode to, we constantly in the paper see all kinds of litigation, all kinds of unfortunate stories. And I think that if we can just be more aware of why might we be looking at someone a certain way, and can we just be open enough to have a conversation to say, hey, I'm noticing this difference. Are we okay with it? Can we go forward together? Or sometimes that's the greatest reason to say, maybe we're not best to be owners in a business together, and let's look at what our exit strategy is versus, oh shucks, we got to keep ownership because dad wanted us to have this business go on for 3 more generations. And sometimes you got to stop and say, okay, how are we best as people to take this forward?
And we'll talk now about your book and what led you to write that. But what I'm trying to do many times when I see forums like ours, they are too formal, they are too politically correct. And I think maybe it's my background as a journalist, try to get some stories that people don't want to talk about. I mean, I think we specialize in bringing speakers that don't want to speak to talk about things they don't want to talk about. For instance, when the son of Robin Williams, the actor, Zach, who's a brilliant guy, talks about mental health, because he wants to help other families and touches those points, I think this is what keeps people up at night. When we have the founder of Second Cup talking about being sexually abused as a kid, being a drug addict on the streets of Toronto, because he wants other families to know, or young people to know, guys, there's a way out and don't do something stupid. Or, Janie Schultz that speaks at our conference in Dallas. This is another interesting thing. We did a session with her husband about marrying into wealth because he wasn't wealthy. And we didn't talk about the agreements he needed to sign, but what did it mean to him to suddenly jump into this culture of this family and all he needed to live up for? And it was very interesting. And by the way, people ask me, how do you get him to talk about something so gentle? But that's exactly what we want to do, to talk about the things. Come on, there are issues here that we need to address. And so by the way, that was a commercial to our conference on March 22nd in Dallas. Janie will be there with us as well. So those of you who want to check it out. So your book. So you wrote a book. When was it released? I Am Enough. What led you to write this book? What is it about? And yeah.
Thank you. And honestly, it was the comment you just made here. The word that kept popping into my head with what you just shared there is being open to be vulnerable. And I think that was really what allowed me to feel is my superpower. Like I grew up, I commented earlier that, felt secluded, felt I had no one to turn to say, oh, shucks, I'm dealing with this money issue, or, oh my gosh, I've received a first dividend. What do I do here? Who do I even turn to say, okay, I got some money here. Like, how do I invest it? Who do I, right? And there just seemed to have always been this, okay, I got to figure it out myself, or, and this closure. And when I attended in, I think it was 2016, I attended a next generation leadership program that took place in Scotland. And he was a 16th generation saying, oh my, what's my next step? And it was as he brought a cohort of individuals together, that really was what opened up the power of vulnerability. When you're told money doesn't grow in trees, and you've got to educate and make your own path, and what does the future look like, and living with this overshadowing power of success, it's hard to sort of step through that and say, well, then who am I, and do I have all that I need to make my path forward? Or will I always be in the shadow? Or will I always, and of course we all have that inner voice I call our saboteur that tends to belittle us and not make us as big as we really could be in our own stance. And it was that course that really brought forward that when we're vulnerable, we open the door to have a conversation, to make us feel more real, to make us realize we are enough with what it is we have, even though there might be some limiting thoughts or some limiting abilities. When you face it and then get the strength of the people around you, it's incredible how that can catapult you forward. And that brings me to, the story. I think one of the hardest things for me to do with my book, I Am Enough, which is a personal journey, was actually pressing that button at the very end of, oh my, do I make this a public story for everyone to be able to have access to, because it's very real and very personal and very vulnerable of me? Or, oh shucks, do I keep it to myself? And that was the hardest part of the whole writing and bringing everything together. And I would just say that, for any of you on this call, or any of you reading the book, is be okay with opening up your vulnerability, because when we ask for help, it's incredible how that not only helps the person we ask, but helps us find our path forward to really shine bright and be the best we can be.
Well, and the book was released when?
October of 2022.
Oh, so it's very, very recent.
Yes.
So it's not even a quarter. Well, it is.
It is.
2 quarters. Wow. So and we can find it on Amazon. I'm
Amazon is where I have it up at the moment. Yes.
And you say, you need to connect with your inner truth. That sounds deep and frightening. So
it is hard work. I call it, it's like peeling the outer layers of a pungent onion and getting to your core. And it's not an easy path. And even the work I do as a family advisor with families, the whole journey to who you are, true to the core. And I find entrepreneurs who are very in flow. We move, but sometimes we don't just stop and say, okay, but who am I in all of this? And it might be when they're caught in a situation of, oh shucks, now I've created this enormous business and this, I have all that I need, but all of a sudden that question of, okay, but what's it all for? What does it really mean? Why is it, what's its why? And for me, it's coming back to those questions and taking the time. We take time. I mean, entrepreneurs, most of us, we have no time, and coming to our core and taking the time to know who we are, knowing what our real truth is. We have voices all around us. We have people giving advice all the time. We have, you turn on the radio, put on the television, watch whatever you stream. I mean, now with the internet and all these, social media, it's so easy to get pulled into what you should be. but that's not necessarily who you are. So coming and asking yourself some deep questions to really get to the core of who you are. And I find this especially for next generations who potentially find themselves in the shadow of their entrepreneurial parent. It's coming down to say, well, what is my real inner light? What is it that really fires me up? And can I be attuned to that? And can I find my voice to really then voice, you know what, Mom, I don't want to take over the business. This is what my interest is. And just have the courage to voice what your true passion is. And yes, it is hard work, not an easy path to take. But when you do take the time to come to who you truly are, the rewards are extraordinary. There's no end to the rewards you get. And when you feel your inner light bright, it's incredible how contagious that is, that no matter who and what you have around you, that light shines not only on yourself, but shines to everybody else around you, who then shines it back on yourself. So I just find it's like one of those electric circuits that just feed off itself and grows you to exponentially. That is an incredible journey to take, that I would, it's like doing your estate planning. It's like, taking the time to start your family meetings. It's my journey sort of reflects back to the work I do. And, of being a family enterprise advisor, it's a process. And if you engage in a process, of finding who you are, your truth, and believing you are enough with all that you have of your own, or the process you take your family through to set up your planning forward and have a clear image of what continuity planning is and what your succession will look like. It's taking the time to engage in that process that I think is what will put more and more enterprising families in a better footage for their next generation, as well as for themselves and their business.
Reminds me of a joke the Muppets had. They had the best jokes, where one is sitting, the Muppets movie opens like that, I think, when one is saying to the other, you know what, I can't live with myself anymore. And the other said, well, you'll have to find another apartment, I guess. So, those stupid Muppets jokes that I thought were hilarious. And we talked about trust and legacy, the connection there. What can you tell us about that?
So my first question will be, well, what is legacy? And different people will see it as different things. Legacy, some might say, well, it's the financial wealth I leave my family next. And I would sort of dive deeper and say, well, isn't the legacy the story people are going to tell about you? And isn't that story best lived now in your living years than when you're no longer here? And what is it that's being done today? Are you creating relationships of connection, or are you creating relationships of pushing people away? And very often lots of planning is done where, hey, I'm dealing with my lawyer, I'm setting this up the best for my children, but the children are never part of that planning. The children are not brought in that conversation. The children are not told, well, by the way, you're 4 siblings here, and well, you got it equally at the end. And it doesn't matter who's working in the business, who's not, you're all equal owners. And it's like you stop and say, well, wait a second, is that the best way to go forward? And so I'm a big believer that the conversations you have in your living years, that's the legacy you're building. It's the trust you have while you're alive and around. And when you build trust, when you trust somebody, you will repeat everything they say because you will live by it. You will say that is the truth. That is, when there's a big difference the way you approach or remember or tell stories of someone when there's trust there versus when there's no trust, you tend to speak negative. So I think the two sort of very much go hand in hand, that when you build trust, and I think building of trust really happens when you share experiences together, when you learn things together, when you come together and have conversations and discussion, when you dive deeper to say, okay, our family is affluent. What does that mean to you? So if you were given $1 million today, what would you do with it? Does it make sense to do that? And you learn what your money talk is. You learn together what that means. You learn together what the values are of the family. And you say, well, you know what? Grandfather built this. His values were this. Do we agree with all those values or don't we? And the more you have these conversations, these shared experiences, even if it's, you do your yearly, hey, we're bringing the family together. We're going to go build pottery today, or next year we're going to go, and you just keep bringing the family together to share, to grow, and to have more stories to tell with each other. I think that goes hand in hand with helping to build trust. It goes hand in hand then when you have those shared moments, you have trust, all of a sudden the legacy you're leaving behind, I only see it going in the positive than the negative. Whereas if it's done where you're not bringing your family together, you're not having conversations, you don't have the trust of the others because they're almost feeling everything was done in secrecy. Everything was done without including them. Everything was done. Oh my gosh, they find out at the death that what, we're worth how much? And all of a sudden that brings all kinds of who knows what kind of thoughts. Well, wasn't I ever trusted to be part of this conversation? Why wasn't I ever told? How come so-and-so is the executor and not such and such? And why was that painting given to so-and-so and not me? And all of a sudden, when there's that trust that breaks, the legacy you're leaving, is that a good legacy or a bad legacy? Chances are, if you haven't built the trust, you're not leaving a very good legacy in the end.
Well, we have some questions from some folks. The easy one is, will the recording be available, as I would like my children to hear this? So yes, it will be available, unless I'll mess it up somehow and delete it, which I can and done before. So yeah, we will send you tomorrow the link to the recording. And you know what? I will share with you. And by the way, I hope I will convince Ms. Saputo to come to our other locations and do this discussion. I have to say, normally when we do these discussions, we are well prepared. We do a call before, we work on the questions. We didn't do none of that here, like absolutely nothing. Half an hour before the conversation, I told Danielle, should we like talk about it? And as you can see, 50 minutes into the discussion, we just don't even have enough time to talk about all these issues. So I would love to have Danielle join us for something like this in other locations. But what I wanted to tell you was, and I'm sharing a secret here, it's no longer a secret. So we are very close to the Silverstein family, and it's not just because they're a major family, just because we are really good friends, that they're the only ones who really laugh at my jokes and mean it. And so they've been telling me for a long time, and it's interesting what you said, trust and all of that, that we should open a club just for families. And the thing is, it sounds redundant, but you have Target 21, you have YPO, you have family business, but what if you don't have a family business? What if you sold your family business? What if you, and most of these groups are dealing with people in their own area, right? So if I'm in Montreal, I'll deal with a chapter in Montreal, and once a year I'll meet others. Great. We thought, which by the way, we are the largest group in the world destination-wise today in the family office space, but we're in Canada, we're in the US, we're in the UAE now, we're in Israel, and we're in the UK, and we see a lot of new wealth and old wealth. Because we came from technology in Israel, we dealt a lot with technology, we met a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of old wealth. And like I shared before about that family from Toronto that did the exit, it said I was lonely at the top. Some of my friends became too friendly, some of them disappeared. All the vendors were jumping, and I didn't know what to do. She could learn so much from you, and you could learn from her because maybe you'd invest with her because they're in the cutting edge of investments. And I met this family from Israel that told me, I took over the business because my father passed away suddenly. He had a heart attack, I think. Suddenly she's running the business. She said, listen, I'm 46. My siblings are all married with families. I'm not. All of my life is working 24/7. And even then, people look at me when I'm taking a check here and there for what I do, like with a weird look. And then I thought, and she said, who can I talk to? She's from Israel. Everybody here knows each other. And then we thought, if we only could mix people who don't mix like you and others in a private settings like that, outside of their geographical warm comfort, there's a lot of interesting discussions that could be made. So that's my secret, that this is what we're working on right now as well. So,
and I will say to add to that, Denny, is that, the experience I had growing up where the feeling of not having anyone to talk to, there is great and I'd say just watch how you do that, because sometimes even the humbleness one might come with, or it's entering a club might not be the right word for somebody, and say no because clubs is too whatever. So I just say I think we need that, and just watch how you bring that forward. But I think that would be so advantageous to many people.
Thank you. Now, so couple of questions. How do I get in touch with Mrs. Saputo? We will send information later on.
Yeah, you can share. Perfect.
Do you believe that change is egocentrically evaluated? And if so, how do you help your clients mitigate the perceived downside of internal family changes?
So we are very much connected to homeostasis. We don't like change, especially when it comes as family system or an enterprising system. We are so used to going forward with the same process, and we're like one of those big ships. And I use that image of the big ship with the ice, with the icebergs, and we're not quick to change our course, even though we know it's the thing we have to do. And I would say that, yes, it takes time. It takes the ability to hear everybody's voice at the table. And it takes a process to sort of say, okay, are we all on the same page to where we need to go? Because it's getting all who's involved on what I call the same team to say, okay, if we know where we're going and why we're going there, then you're in a better position to have everyone say, okay, how can I help? Is there a role? Is there a responsibility I can take to make sure we get us there? So I think lots of families, we need to look at how changes are good for us. It is not easy to change what has been for generations, but there definitely is a way and a process if you can have everybody involved and engaged to go forward to achieve that. I hope that answers the question.
And with your experience, have you been to situations where you saw cases of families where you said, okay, you know what, this is lost. There's no way I can solve this thing. This guy is crazy.
And I always say, I'm not the one who brings forward the solutions. It really is the family who brings forward what works best for them. I just help have those conversations and bring forward what is best, and can everyone hear it and everyone agree? I have been in a situation where we came to realize, that the step forward isn't with, what was originally looked at, but sometimes you have to step back and say, hey, is there some deeper hurt here? Is there some potential counseling that's needed instead, or some, further conversations to sort of solve some past issues before you can go forward? And sometimes it's also separating. You have certain generations say, okay, let's get from the next generation where they want to go. And then I would stop and say, well, you as the generation, do you know where you want to go? And sometimes we got to stop and say, okay, like, where do we got to work first? Are we letting the next generation make the decisions, but once they make a decision, you're saying, no, I'm in control here, I have full voting, we're not going that way? It's like, well, then why did you make them do all that work? You've all of a sudden taken 10 steps backwards instead of a step forward. So it's really just navigating, where is the family at themselves at that moment? Where is the best place to start? And when you're looking at change, sort of get a clear picture of what that looks like, and who are and what are the moving pieces. To me, it's like playing, chess on a board. It's, you got to sort of forelook or foresee what some moves might be. And it's like, okay, can we do some good preparation beforehand? And again, it's like finding your truth. It takes time. We don't sometimes have all the questions to ask ourselves. So surrounding yourself by the appropriate people who will dive deeper. I've seen too often that people reach a level of success, but all they have around them are yes men or yes women or yes people who it's like, yes, and believe that the entrepreneur knows all the answers. So it's, yes, sir, we'll do that. Yes, ma'am, we'll get you there. Right. And don't, or stop challenging them, because although they've reached a certain level, to go to the next level they've never been to. So they need, you need the right questions. You need to be challenged at every step of the way, and being surrounded by people who can challenge you to bring forward what's best for you and your family and whoever else is involved. I think that's where you can achieve the changes and the going forward and mitigating some of the potential things that you can be faced with.
Now, you facilitate parenting workshop within your community. So that's interesting. So what's that all about? Is that you learn how to not scream your heads off at your kids and stuff like that?
Well, see, and that there again, it's based off not how you can change your child, but there again, the I am enough philosophy is finding out what it is you need. What boundaries do you need to set? What are your strengths and weaknesses? So it sort of brings back to, well, can you look internally to yourself? Like, are you blowing up because you're bothered by something, or is that your internal voice? So it's helping parents, and we're caught with, I think one of the areas I've been faced with is the whole, are my children entitled? Am I, growing spoiled brats? Are they standing their own ground? Oh my gosh, they don't even put their clothes in the hamper. They just leave them lying up the stairs as I'm going up to their room. And right. So it's not what changes can you put in your child, but hey, can you look internally to yourself and find where, like, what maybe have you missed in your process of parenting that can be potentially, just sometimes the littlest of change, just changing something in minor direction in the long run can make all the difference. So it's just helping parents sort of ask themselves questions to see what can they change of themselves to better their relationship with their children.
That's nice. And I wonder if we all the time parent well, for instance, I'm watching now, I've, by the way, one of the things I like to do is irrelevant feedback to things that my guests say, which is what I'm doing now. So there's this show, you should check it out, even though it's not all of it is as good as not all chapters. Nicolas Cage, The History of Cursing. So when we tell our kids not to curse and all of that, did you know that cursing gives you psychologically more power to do something tough? So they did, and it was proven. So they did an experiment. So one team had to put their hands in cold, freezing water without cursing. The others could say, "God damn it!" It's whatever. They could curse. They could do whatever they want. And all those who cursed had their hand longer in the water, which proves psychologically that when you have a big challenge, it works. So we're just telling you, we always say, don't say that. And somebody should say that, go ahead. So anyway, and maybe, so just, maybe I'll just ask another stupid question in the sense of Canadian families. When I came to Canada, the first recommendation I got about doing something like this in Canada was don't. You will fail. Canadian families are private. They don't like to share. They are not as free as American families. Sometimes are more open-minded than others. It will not work. So I, of course, did the exact opposite, and it worked beautifully. And I think we actually saw that while it may be true, I did go to a Jewish Federation event with a lot of cards, and I just gave cards. Nobody gave me even one back. So I said, okay, I get it. You guys don't want, okay. But still, what we found is that when families are being approached right, they're there. They want to learn more. So maybe we hit a tipping point in the Canadian family business, family office, growth, where they are more ready to see that. So my question is, do you think Canadian families are different in a way, are more preservative, are more cautious, or?
In my experience, any family that I've approached, there's a hunger for speaking out, for wanting to know. And I think that's what it is within the process. If you're bringing forward education, bringing forward a nugget to help them go forward, and the secret you let out just a moment ago of helping to bring more people together so that they can share and potentially network to get help each other keep moving forward. I think when a safe space is created and you allow and there again, I think the different, I haven't worked with many other families outside of Canada. My focus has been Canadian at the moment. And I find that when you create that safe space and really make the family feel that you're there to help them, that the education and the process they're going through is to better the family, it's incredible how much information you get, how open one is willing to be. And that's where I'd say is that fine line, because if it's like, oh, pay me and I'll get you this, well, then there's that, well, why you worth that, right? Is it worth what I'm paying? And all of a sudden there might be a different, but if it's, hey, let's get together and see, where this can go, it all of a sudden changes the way it's like, okay, am I going because you're gaining something, or am I in this because I can really gain something, right? And I think that is, but is that different for anybody else? I wouldn't think so. I don't know why you were told not to, because growing up as a Canadian family, I could tell you, yes, there was lots of reservation. There wasn't an openness to go out and talk to anybody else. And I think that's what I also said about my book, that sharing my story, because, oh my God, we're usually so private and so close, was like the hardest part of that whole process. But it was coming to vulnerability. And I don't know, is that something people are accepting more? That, hey, when you're able to say, I don't have all the answers, or, I got us this far, but I don't know how to take us the next step. And just being open to what that minor next thing is, and being okay to say, I don't know, or I don't have that answer, or I need help. I think the more we're open to that, the more successful we'll be with getting the help we need to even go that much further ahead.
Yeah, so and I agree. I mean, taking it to more destinations is also very interesting, and bring families to the right forum is what we're all about. And actually, I can see that on the call with us is a major family that member that came to our Vancouver conference and loved it so much, which was we were very flattered. And she said, if you guys are coming to Calgary, I will help you make it happen there. And here we are, Calgary. So I wanted to sum it up and say thank you very much, first of all, for being here. I would love to have you in person at some of our locations this year. So I will nag about it later on. I'd like to tell everybody that on March 20th, we're in Dallas. So no, we're in Houston. Metro Smack will be speaking there. That's, interesting story of a Texan family says, I don't have PAs and I don't do emails. You want to talk to me, you call me. I'm like, okay, that still works. And the 7-Eleven family will be there. And many others, TGI Fridays family will be there. Blinds.com, that was a big exit, will be there. And then 2 days later, we're in Dallas for a conference on March 22nd. Again, 7-Eleven family and lots of other great speakers. And then in May, we're in Canada on the 9th in Vancouver. Again, 7-Eleven family, but she's a very interesting person to bring to speak in Vancouver, and others. And of course, Toronto on the 9th, where we have Philippe Degaspé-Bombian. I will never know how to pronounce it exactly. So this is my version. Naomi Azrieli, a major family from Montreal, from where you guys are. And I forgot another major name there in Toronto. And then in October, we're in Calgary and Montreal. And yeah, so thank you all for being here. We'll send the recording. And Danielle, thank you so much for finding the time to do this. It was really great and interesting.
Denny, thank you. And thank you, everyone who was on the call. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the week. Bye-bye.